A lot of data scientists or data analysts are happy in their jobs and you know, that's what they want to do. But occasionally I get requests from data scientists or data analysts who ask that they want to go contracting or freelancing, and they want to know what it is that they need to do. Now, a lot of the time when people want to go contracting or freelancing, they usually think about how do I get clients, and how do I you know, get those projects so that I can go freelancing or contracting. Now in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for a step-by-step guide on how to become a contractor. And the things I'm going to pick out are more than just what you need to do the job. So I'm going to break this video up into 3 parts. The first part is what you should do before you leave your job. So how should you prepare yourself to become a contracting data analyst or data scientist? Then I'm going to talk about when you're ready to leave. So you've potentially going to hand in your notice, you're ready to leave, you've got everything ready, and you're about to, you know, make the jump to become a contracting data analyst or data scientist. And then finally, what you need to do once you've left, because there are things still to be done once you've left your job and started becoming a contracting data analyst or data scientist. So let's talk about what you need to do before you leave your job. Now, the first thing I would always recommend is build your network. Now, it is much easier to build a network when you're in a company and a job than it is out of it. And one of the reasons is, especially if you work for a brand, a well-known brand, is that people are more likely to connect with you because they you know, well, you work for a big brand, so they want to also be connecting with you. So it's a good opportunity while you're working in a company to network with people. Even if you don't work for a well-known brand, just the fact that you are an employee makes it much easier. People think you're not going to sell them anything. You're a data analyst in a company and you're reaching out to network. Now, who should you network with? Obviously, try and network with a broad range of people, but if you're going to go contracting, you've got to focus on the people who are going to be hiring contracting data analysts. Now, these aren't necessarily the people who are the budget holders, okay? So not the very senior people who would sign off the budget, but the people actually making the decision. Now, typically these are people like analytics managers or head of analytics or even senior analysts, okay? They're usually the ones that get a need and they get authority to get a budget, they get a budget signed off to hire a contractor to help them with a short-term project or some kind of task that they don't have capacity or skill set to do. So those are people you're trying to target with, okay? Now, when you network with these people, what you're trying to do is not trying to sell your services, because at this stage, you know, you're still in your job, you're thinking about contracting. What you want to really understand is how do they utilize contractors, okay, if at all, okay? So you'd reach out to them, you talk about the job that you're doing, you'd ask them what they're doing in their jobs, and if they use, you know, freelancers or contractors for projects, and that helps you identify who it is that you can reach out to when you're ready to go contracting, to ask them if they have any projects or tasks that they need doing. The other thing you should do in your networking is reach out to also other contractors. Now, I know you might think, oh, but I'm competition. If I go freelancing or contracting as a data analyst or data scientist, I'm going to be competing with them, but there is actually a community. So reach out to other contractors. You'll find that a lot of them are happy to provide advice and help on what to, you know, look out for when you're contracting. They're also probably happy to give you recommendations, especially if you can find contractors who probably don't have the same skill set as you. So if you're, let's say, an expert in Python and you find a contractor who's very good at Power BI, you might find that they work on projects where they need Python skills, and they're looking for also a network of people they can bring in to help their clients, because obviously if they can help their clients, they look good to their clients, and therefore, you know, they're more likely to get more projects. So try and network with contracts. Obviously, if you network with contractors with the same or similar skill set, there will be some element of competition. But generally, if you network with people who've got complementary skill sets, you'll find that they'll want to be very helpful and advise you, you know, on what to look out for when you're looking to become contracting or freelancing. Now, when you're working, you know, you would hopefully have some free time, and in that time, what you want to be doing is also creating your assets. So, getting your assets for your website ready, getting your emails ready, understanding what your pitch is, if you need to create any business cards or any brochures, whatever you think is relevant that you need in your line of work or your market even, you know, what do you need in order to be contracting? I mean, in some markets, people prefer a business card so they can contact you later, maybe even freshen up your LinkedIn, but try and get the assets ready, because once you start contracting, you find that you may not have that spare capacity that you probably have when you're in a job to do those assets, or what may happen is that it just falls on the back burner because there's more important things to do and you don't really want to be doing that. So try and get those things ready And it's also quite an exciting time because you're thinking of going contracting, and therefore you're quite motivating to want to build these assets. Later on, when you're already contracting, the motivation may go to create those assets. And it's very important to have a good website to make sure your emails are all set up and stuff. And also, you know, whether you want to create a CRM system to reach out to people on a regular basis. So when you network with people, you obviously want to take their details down, and it can be as easy as just doing it in an Excel file or a Google sheet where you just list down the last time you contacted them, what you spoke about, and then when you want to contact them next. Or you can use, you know, CRM tools like HubSpot, where you can put in the details and then, you know, follow up. Or in fact, you can keep it very simple. You can just put a reminder in your Google Gmail, or your Outlook to follow up with people. So whatever you do, just create your assets, get your systems in line, so that when you do go freelancing, you're not having to worry about those things. Another thing that when you're in a role or in a company, in a job, is that you have access to a lot of documentation. Now, I'm not advocating you stealing any of that information, but just look at the kind of things that your company uses when they employ contractors or freelancers, okay, or things that they would need. Or also when you're networking, speak to people about what they need from a contractor. Now, you'll obviously need some kind of agreement or contract when you go on a project. Typically, the company provides that. So whenever I've worked for companies and we've hired contractors, we provide the agreement and they sign onto it. Sometimes companies might ask you for an agreement, okay, or they may ask you for a statement of work. So you will need to decide what you will need, but also get those assets now, okay. Again, like I said, I wouldn't advocate stealing from your company, but take ideas, take headlines of what it is that the agreement should do, and then either speak to a solicitor or a lawyer to draft those agreements, or look for templates online that you'll easily find, or speak to other contractors to give you templates, and then you can adapt them to yourself. It's always good to get a legal eye over it. So if you've got a friend who's a lawyer or a solicitor, it's really good for them to skim it just to give you any points or tips. If not, spend a few £100 to get a lawyer to look through the agreement, just to make sure that there's nothing that will catch you out. The other things that you might want to also collate as assets in terms of documentation are non-disclosure agreements. A lot of clients will say, can you sign an NDA, especially a mutual NDA? So you need to have those so that you know what it is when they ask for it. You might also be asked for a data processing agreement, which is basically, you know, how you're going to process the data, what you're going to do, how they're going to be stored, what security you're going to be doing. And then you might also want to look at what kind of insurance you might need. Okay, so again, as part of the process or before you leave, when you're speaking to people, look at what your company does. You want to be able to build those assets so you have them once you've left. And then finally, one of the things I recommend that if you're going contracting is to collect about 3 to 6 months worth of savings. So think about how much it costs to run your household, things like mortgage or rent, food, electricity, car costs, whatever. Look at all the costs that you have every month, okay, and decide on 3 to 6 months, okay. That's what I typically recommend. Now, the reason for that is if you go contracting, okay, typically they'll pay you maybe 2 weeks, 4 weeks later, okay. So you need to work for a few weeks, then invoice them, and then they will pay you. So it could be up to 2 months, if not 3 months, before you get paid. So you need to cover that period where you're not getting any income, and that's where your savings come in. So create this pot where you try to maintain about 3 to 6 months worth of savings. If you can do 6 months, that's much better, because when you have dry spells where you're not finding clients, you're not panicking then and taking any job, things that you may not enjoy doing or things that may not be right for you. But having 6 months of savings allows you the luxury to be able to be selective in the kind of projects that you choose. So have this savings pot, always top it up to make sure at least the minimum that you need if you have a dry spell in projects, okay, and try and do that while you're in a job, so you're building it up. You're not building it up after you've quit and stuff, because your salary will run out. So while you're still in a job, got a salary, work out what your monthly cost is and try to create a nest egg. If it means cutting back on a few luxuries, do so in order to build this savings pot. Okay, so now you've done all of that and you're about to leave. So what should you do when you're ready to leave? So you'll need a company. So typically nowadays when you go contracting, they won't engage with you as an individual. They need a legal company in order to engage with, so that they know the taxes and stuff are being paid. So you need a company. So register a company, whether it's a limited company, a partnership, sole trader, whatever it is, you need to register something. In the UK, it's with Companies House. In other countries, it will be the same process. You just register and you'll get a company ID and all the things, and you can then open a company bank account and so forth. So get all of those done, get all that done so that you are ready because you've now decided that I want to leave, so you need to start getting all those the legal stuff in place. Then what you want to do is start speaking to some potential clients. So like I mentioned before, when you are in the process, before you're leaving, you would have networked and spoke to a lot of people, especially potential clients, and asked them if they use contractors or freelancers. So those that you've highlighted that you feel would be good potential clients, people also you would enjoy working with, companies you'd enjoy working for, then reach out to them and say, look, you know, I've decided that I'm going to go freelancing, or I'm going to go contracting, and it'll be great if you had anything that you would keep me in mind. And here you probably want your CV ready, you want your website ready, that you could just send it to them and say, look, here's information about me that would help you, decide if I'm a good fit. Then what I would advise is that you speak to recruiters. Okay, now a lot of people prefer to go direct because obviously recruiters add a margin, so that before it becomes slightly more expensive for clients. But recruiters are very good because they have very good relationship with clients. Well, the good ones do anyway. So they have very good relationship with clients, and they're always picking up jobs, and they need a network of contractors that they can reach out to provide those jobs to. Okay, so it's always good to reach out to recruiters. Find yourself a couple that you feel you could work with, that you feel match your working style. Also, you feel comfortable talking to them, telling them about your day rate, all that kind of stuff. So speak to a few recruiters. They'll also help you understand the marketplace, what's happening, what's in demand, help you understand what skills you need to probably skill up on or refine if that's where the market is going. But try and reach out to a few recruiters and keep them there. Then obviously you've got to decide on your price. So what would your going rate be? Now, there are usually industry surveys that are done every year. So if you look for, like, there's companies like Harnum who do a survey, a salary survey. You can look at those salary surveys, and you can see what the salary going rate for a contractor is in your domain with the number of years experience that you have. Okay, the other way is just to work out how much money you need. Now, typically if you're going to create a day rate from scratch, then what you want to do is take what salary you would expect to get and assume that you're only working 70% of the year, because there'll be downtime. You've got things like taking holidays, but then you've got time between projects, okay, where you won't get paid. Okay, it's not like a job where you get paid a salary irrespective of what you're doing, even if you're between projects. When you're contracting, you're only paid when you're working. So assume that you're only going to be working 75% of the year. So that's like 9 months out of the 12 months. Okay, so you divide what your annual salary is by that number of working days, add all your expenses, and then add a bit of profit, because obviously you're going to pay tax on that, and you also want to make a bit of profit as well, because that's the whole point of going contracting, and then see what number you come to. Typically what you find is that the number you come to will match what the industry is willing to pay. The other thing is obviously recruiters can advise you on what the going rate is. Now, one thing you have to bear in mind is that sometimes the going rate might be much lower than you'd expected, so you've got to decide whether it's worth now jumping ship and becoming a freelancer with your skill set. But you'll find that typically contracting pays much higher than a salary job, and one of the reasons is because it's risk. You may not have paid work all the time. Sometimes you might find that it pays quite a bit more, okay, and this is quite tempting then to price yourself really high. If you do that and you get a few projects or a few contracts at that rate, what you might find later on is that you can't always find those projects, so they're much lower, and it's really hard then to lower your rate. So think of yourself at a certain rate, and if you get a higher rate, consider it a bonus, but always say, this is my rate. If it's higher, that's brilliant. If it's not, then this is a rate that I would like. Okay, so make sure you decide on the price. It just makes it easier, because that's going to be the core of what someone's going to ask you. They're going to ask you, what's your day rate? Okay, especially if you go to recruiters, but also companies. When you speak to them, they'll say, well, what's your day rate? And they'll compare it with what they typically pay contractors with your skill set and your years of experience. Then what you want to do is also speak to accountants, okay, because you want to get first of all, you want to find a really good accountant who understands your position, what you're trying to do, what your ambitions are in life. Are you trying to do contracting forever? Are you going to hopefully move from contracting to setting up your own company where you hire other people? Is contracting just a short-term period because you've got other things that in your personal life that you want to work around? Whatever it is, if you speak to your accountant, they'll help you understand and manage your money and give you good advice on how to minimize the amount of tax that you pay. Okay, so try and find a good accountant. A lot of accountants, you'll find are very procedural, so they're like, okay, we'll do this, this and this, but what you want to find is an accountant who you can speak to, who you can say, look, what's best for me if I do this, what's best for me if I do this, okay? And those kind of accountants are out there, and they're really willing to help you, okay? Also ask other contractors for recommendations and accountants, and then it also gives you an idea of what price they'll be charging you. There are sort of four main areas accountants will charge you for. One is the annual account, so every year when you need to do an annual account to submit to HMRC about how much money you've made and how much tax you should pay them. So that's one thing they'll charge you for. The other is quarterly VAT, so there's another charge for that. There'll be a payroll charge, because obviously what you want to do is take a small salary and the rest of the money in dividends, because you're taxed less generally in dividends. And then finally your self-assessment, okay? So they're generally the four areas. There'll be other things like they have to do submissions once in a while, which cost a few £100 here and there. So you just speak to an accountant, they'll tell you. If you speak to 3 or 4, you get a general idea of how much these things cost. The other thing when you're ready to go is to make sure that you have at least 2 or 3 clients who are ready to sign, okay? What you don't want to do is ready to go if no one is willing to sign, okay? Because it may suggest that you can't, you're finding it difficult to find clients, or at the moment that you're willing to leave, it's a difficult marketplace. So try to see that you at least you've had discussions with those clients that you spoke to, while you were thinking, or during your thinking of leaving, before you're leaving, and see if any of them are willing to sign it, or if they've got any live projects or projects that are about to go live. Because the last thing you want to do is leave and then have nothing for a month or so. It'll make you panic. You think you made the wrong decision. So try to get at least 2 or 3 clients who show some kind of positive signal that they're willing to sign, or a recruiter who's like put you forward for a few roles and they're about to be sort of imminent in the next 2 or 3 weeks. That means it gives you confidence that when you leave you're going into a job, and before you resign basically. So if you decide that there's nothing happening, no one's signing off, and you haven't resigned yet, then maybe you might want to hold off and plan a bit more before you resign, and then move on to become a contractor. Now the ideal scenario would also be that is just before you're about to resign and leave, is if you could get some small projects that you could do on the side. Now again, I've done a video on whether you could do data analytics as a side hustle while you're doing your main job. Check all those things, check the video out, and make sure that you understand what your contract says about doing side hustles. Now if your employer does allow you to do it, then that's a good way to get into contracting. Do those small side hustles, and then what you'll find is that you will understand the process, how it works, how you invoice, how you deliver, all those kind of stuff, how you communicate with the client, and it just gives you reassurance that when you go full-time contracting, that you sort of know what to do. So now you've left and you've gone full-time into contracting and you're doing your projects, what should you do now? One of the things that I advise people to do is work out what your working schedule is. When you're a contractor, you don't have to work 9 to 5. Now that's when most contracting is now remote. If the contracting expects you to be in the office, or they expect you to log in during the core hours, then obviously you have to work 9 to 5, 9 to 6. There's nothing about it. But some contracting is like, here's the tasks that we need you to do, and you need to do 8 hours a day. And what you might decide is that you break that up. You might decide, I'm going to do some chunk of that in the morning and some chunk of that in the evening or the afternoon and night, whatever it is, but work out what works for you. Now, one of the things that you want to do when you go contracting is to create a better in a working environment for yourself. Okay, so you don't want to be working 9 to 6 if that's not conducive to how you perform optimally. Okay, so maybe you can discuss this with employer and say, look, I'll get the work done, but I work best at these hours. Okay, and you may also have family commitments. You may want to spend more time with your children, which is one of the reasons why you've gone contracting. So work around what is a good work schedule for you. Like I said, sometimes it's not possible because the client will dictate when they want you online, but generally you'll find clients are quite flexible, especially in the data analytics space, especially if you're working on a project and they just want the deliverable, and they're giving you a timeline in which to do it. So they might say, look, come in 3 months to do this or 3 weeks to do this, and you plan it out and you do it in your own work schedule. The other thing that you mustn't drop once you've started contracting is networking. Okay, keep networking, reach out to potential clients, keep meeting them, have coffee. If you have time, go to networking events, but try to be constantly visible to clients, and that happens through networking, and also can continue to communicate with them. So like I said, you should have your CRM system, so you should be messaging them every 2-3 months. Sometimes it's not about asking them for work or projects. It could also be just asking telling them about things that you've learned, things that could benefit them, because obviously giving value or adding value to the content that you give will be useful for the person, and then they're more likely to think of you positively when they have projects that they want done. The other thing about networking is also network with other contractors, okay, because they can also help you understand if there are any projects that are coming up in the company that they're currently working in, and so therefore you sort of get a head start in applying for those roles. So continue to network with contractors, also with recruiters, because again you want to keep that open. Don't ever dismiss a channel from which you can get projects. Okay, you never know at what stage you may need them. Sometimes what happens is that people go contracting when it's a really good time, it's a boom time, and they think they don't need anybody else, they'll just get these projects coming in. But suddenly the market sort of dries up, or there's an economic shock somewhere, and projects dry up, and suddenly you find you're struggling to get contracts. So try to make sure that you keep that networking live, as well as your CRM activity. One of the things that you'll know when you go contracting is that you have to manage your own finances. So try and stay on top of that. Try and allocate, a few hours a week where you can just stay on top of it. If you let it build up, and things that I can tell you from personal experience, if you do let it build up, it becomes quite overwhelming when you have to then sit down and do it. So every week, just try and stay on top of it. Try and reconcile your expenses. Make sure that you give everything that the accountant wants on time, and then you find it's not a burden. It becomes something that's very easy to handle, and you can do it relatively easily. Now, when you are contracting, one of the things that you may believe is that people only want contractors for full time, okay, and sometimes even the client thinks they can only hire contractors full time. But as a contractor, you're not bound by exclusivity, okay? So you could actually approach clients where they may have a need that they need someone for 1 day a week or a few days a month, okay? So a lot of companies do monthly reporting, or they'll do monthly analysis of something, or they update a model every month or every quarter. You can offer your fraction of your time to them, and you could say to them, look, when I was working for you, I noticed that you do this monthly reports, and you don't need a full-time person. You may have an existing team that has to then work really, extra on that time, where they drop other tasks while they're working on the monthly report or the quarterly report. How about I do it for you? I would just, charge you for 2-3 days to do this, and I would do it every month for you. Now, again, it may be that the client hasn't thought about it, so you just need to convince them a bit. And it's not something that people generally advertise. They want those kind of resources, fractional type resources, but I'm seeing it become more and more common that people do want fractional resources, and sometimes the client doesn't know that they can get these fractional resources. So if you approach them and propose that, you may find that you can try and get 2 or 3 side gigs alongside your main contract, which just gives you sort of continual small revenue, but continual revenue coming in. And what happens is that when you're working with these clients, you become very familiar with their data. So you're doing the same thing every month or every week, let's say, and for a couple of hours or a few days a month. And then suddenly, if your contract finishes, you could approach them and say, look, I'm free now. Is there anything else you want me to do? And if they did have something, you already know their data, so you could start from day one adding lots of value. And so they could fill in the void when you don't have projects. So if you can do that, it's advisable. I know it may take a bit of time, so you may find that if you're doing a monthly report for them 2-3 days, it may be the weekend, but it's just a good way of getting this incremental revenue that gives you some kind of security. But also, if you're any void periods, you have 2 or 3 clients that you can approach who you are currently working for to get projects. And then finally, once you have started contracting, is to keep learning. Okay, don't ever stop learning. Okay, things evolve, tools evolve, knowledge will always be updated, so you need to make sure you keep your knowledge updated as well. Okay, so keep learning. Okay, so that's my step-by-step guide on how to get into contracting as a data analyst or a data scientist. I hope you found the video useful. Please do like and share the video, and of course please do subscribe to the channel